Hi, today I wanted to run through a new MFT bench build project that I'm working on. This might be useful to some people out there as well. This particular bench is based on the two tools that I use the most, and that is the router and the track saw. The concept for the bench is it needs to be sturdy, like a normal woodworking bench, but it also needs to be mobile. This bench will also have an extension unit to make it a bit longer. The standard bench size is 1500mm by 800mm, and the extension leaf adds another 500mm. I have taken concepts of benches that already exist on YouTube, and there are great videos around those. There's description in the links below that will show you those components of the build. What I will show you is the adaptations that I've made to those concepts and how they work, and also I will provide a detailed set of instructions that you can download and follow if you want to build the same thing. So this bench frame is made from a single sheet of plywood. This particular plywood was 32mm thick, and I just cut it down to length and width on the table saw. We've joined most of it with pocket holes and laminated pieces together. You can't see it very easily in this, but these are all sort of slotted together, these pieces, so it's quite a rigid design. Now, to see how exactly this gets put together and cut out, if you look at the Dennis's Hooked on Wood video, this is largely an exact copy of that design. So he goes through in detail on how to do that. The dimensions for this, though, and they are in the links below. You can download free of charge the PDF that will give you the exact cutting requirements for this particular part of the bench. So in this particular design you'll see that on this side the legs are flush with the cross member. It's coming across here, and these outer bracing members are three sections of that ply laminated together. So this is 70mm thick and nearly 100mm wide when you put those together. So very rigid, quite heavy too, but on rollers moves around very easily. This side's exactly the same thing, but this cross member is inset to the legs, and that's just so we can put the folding leaf extension in that part of the table. So here's a look at how this looks without the MFT tops on them. So this extension arm is made up of two pieces, so a base for top, and then a bracket that sits against the cabinet that locks into place, and this just holds this parallel and level with the surface of the bench. And then when you don't need it, you just fold this back into place, and this just folds away. In this bench I've also got some underbench storage. It's just a simple plywood box connected together with pocket hole screws. On this side of the box is just some storage space. You might want to put doors on here if you need to. In my particular case, I don't think I will. And if we flip it around to the other side, we've got some slide out drawers. Rather than using some sort of drawer mechanism, to make this cheap and simple, I've just created some runners. Now this is all based on Hooked on Wood bench that's in the description below. He goes through this in detail how to make this. So I'm not going to show you that, but this is the what I've got. The instructions I do have show you how to make and assemble and cut out what you need to make this particular bench or this particular cabinet of this particular size. Now this bench is mobile. As you can see here, I can very easily move this around. But what I wanted for the bench is when I'm actually using it, I don't want it to be mobile. I want it to be solid and in place. So I've taken a design from Proper DIY, which is a guy in the UK that had come up with this concept and added it to this particular bench. Works magnificently, and that's it. Now that lowers the legs to the ground, and I can do the same thing on the other side. And now we have a very sturdy bench in place, and if I'm doing any cutting or clamping or anything that requires this to be in a fixed position, this is now solid as a rock. And to put it back in position, all you have to do is the reverse. And there you go, and we now got it rolling again. This build is also going to incorporate a MITRE track on either side of the bench. But rather than route this into position, what I've decided to do is use some MDF of very similar width to this MITRE track and inset this within that piece of MDF. So rather than route it in, I'll just cut it to size, so put a piece above it and a piece below it, and this will just sit flush with it in between it. So now with the MITRE track in place on both sides, we're now ready to put the bench top on. I've already pre-drilled the pocket holes, so you should see the pocket hole joinery just here. So now we're just going to place the sheet on top, align it, and then just secure it in with the pocket holes. Now have the bench top in place. There's a tiny bit of overhang all around except on this edge where I've got the leaf that has to butt up. So this lines up just with the legs. But the little bit that's hanging over, once I pin this down, I'll then eventually take the trim router and just bring it all into line. With the bench now finished in terms of the MFT holes, it's now time to put in the router, and in particular the router plate. So this is going to be something like this, and the way that we do this is that we route a recess in for this plate. This plate's about 5mm thick. To do that, I am going to use a template that I made. This was from a bit of leftover MDF that I had. This is 12mm thick, and essentially what I did was just cut out a hole in the middle of this plate, so it perfectly matches this template. So all we have to do is just line up these holes, stick in the alignment dogs, like this, and screw it into place. Then we just want to put in another plate. This plate will ensure that the router sits flush and doesn't tip over when the bit's going around. The particular bit that we've got in here is a flush trim bit. So I'll get a close up of that in a sec, but the flush trim bit just has a bearing at the top, and that's important because when we use this as a template, this bearing's going to ride along this part of the template and guide the cutting head, so we cut exactly to the template. Having this then in the center also gives us the other side of the edge, as well as keeping the router very stable as we move across this. And all we simply do is just screw this into place. So let's give that a go, see how it comes out. So to set the depth of the router correctly, all you need to do is set your router over the hole, over where you want to position it, bottom it out, so push it all the way to the bottom, lock it in place, so this is now the tip of the bit touching the top of where we're going to start routing. And to make sure the thickness is correct, is just take the item that you want to measure the thickness against, so I'm just going to use the plate. And over on the side here, there's a depth stop, so if you shove the plate in there, you can then just adjust that depth stop to get it just where you need it. So that's about right, so we're ready to go. Okay, so we're down to depth that I set. So let's have a quick check and see how close we are to where we need to be. So about 6mm, according to this, pretty much smack on. However, if this or something's slightly out of level, or there's some ridges in here, I need to be a mil or two underneath that, just so I can correct it. So what I'll do now is just adjust the router so it just goes slightly deeper, and then I'll give it one more pass, clean it all up, and then hopefully we're in depth. One of the nice things about having this sort of jig that's pinned in position with the dogs, unlike most jigs which are, you know, sort of glued in place, if you take it away, it's really difficult to get it back in exactly the same location. With this one, no problems. With these dogs lining up with the table, I'm pretty sure that we're going to be able to remove this, put it back, and if we have to do some more, and not be in a situation where we're out of alignment. Okay, so that's the hole cut out of the middle so we can actually pop the router through. That's looking really good, and as you notice there with the jigsaw, we didn't have to be particularly accurate. It was this inside hole, it's not important how accurate it is, so I just drew some lines and followed it with the jigsaw, and I think that's going to be good enough. So this is the bit that popped out of the middle, but the moment of truth. Let's see if this thing fits. Oh, there you go, like a beauty. So with the router now in place, we're ready now to put in the MITRE tracks that I'll need for the router fence. So essentially all we need to do is just mark this up, and then we'll route it into position. So I've got these positioned where I need them. So what I'm doing here is just setting up the router and using a straight edge to run the router along. I've also got a stop at the end so I can cut to the correct length, and one at the start. The bit that I'm using is a 19mm bit, which is the exact same width as the T-track. I'm really lucky in that case that you can use the same bit width as your T-track. And all you need to do is just gradually get down to the depth that you need. Here I'm doing the final pass. Okay, now we have the slot routed. Let's check that it fits. Oh, beautiful. Wow, nice. So the router bit leaves a round end, which is not what we're trying to achieve here, so I'll just chisel this little bit out here so this butts right into it. In the next part of the operation, what I'd like to do is just trim the tabletop to the edges. I've made it slightly oversized, so I should be able to, just with the flush trim router, just run along the edge here and bring it all into line. So to do this, what I've done is installed a flush trim bit in the router, and this is simply just a bit with a bearing on the end on the bottom of it rather than on the top. So in this particular case, what I want is the bearing to run across the edge that I want to be the top to be flush with, and then the cutting part of the router will just cut this back in line with this. One of the things to remember too is to run anti-clockwise around the table. This will ensure that the bit is running in towards the table rather than trying to run out away from the table, and so I should get a much cleaner cut doing that. Also, to avoid a bit of blowout at the edge of the table here, I'm a bit worried that as the router runs past the edge, this could chip off. So I've just clamped into place a bit of block of wood here, so hopefully that will allow us to preserve this edge a little bit. So the next part of the build is going to be looking at putting on the extension table. We've got all the mechanism ready to go. What we need to do is just put a brace in place at the bottom, so when this goes into position, it locks into place. And simply all I'm going to do is screw on a piece of MDF just at this angle to keep it in place. There you go, so that's now in place, or approximately where it needs to be, very close to where it needs to be. What I might do also is just put bolts through here and make the holes a little bit larger, so there's a little bit of wiggle room here. So I'm just going to use these T-bolts that are used for T-tracks, and hopefully that will work in terms of adjusting and holding that plate in place so I can manoeuvre it up and down. Okay, so this is how it's supposed to go. So with the next bit, we get to put the extension top on. Butt it up, line it up. So with the jig now, I'm about to route the next series of holes, and essentially I want the holes to be exactly in line with these ones. The neat thing about this jig is that you're able to do the offset holes, so the holes in between a set of 4 holes. So I've already got 2 offset holes here, and where they benefit me in doing these next series of holes, that if I was to go off the standard set of holes back here, I can't do these holes because it's right over the seam between the extension and the table. So the next series of holes at 96 spacings is here, and for me that's a little bit too far away. It's quite a long way from this hole or this hole. So what I'm going to do is use these offset holes and just pin it in there, and then I'll get the first row of holes just past this seam and closer to the edge, and then I should be able to get a few more holes into the table. So all we have to do is just pin it in. These clamping dogs keeps it nice and snug, and it looks like it's all good. Now it's just about taking that router, boring them out. So that's the last row of holes done here. So let's have a look, see how that's come up. Now the last thing that we want to do is that this jig, like with the rest of the table, is only 6 wide, and I need to go 7 holes wide. So really simple operation. It's just flip the jig around this way and clip it into place, and just do those last 4 holes on the outside. Now we know that this again is all aligned because we have the jig around this way. When we rotate it 90 degrees, if these holes as we moved along weren't exactly at 96 spacings, these holes here wouldn't work. So this clips straight into place, so we know it is absolutely square. So let's do these last 4 holes and we're done. This extension top is now finished, but it doesn't just serve as an extension top. If I fold this away now, it falls down neatly like this. What I can actually do now is use this as a clamp for, if I wanted to work on this, for instance, I could just So the next operation that we need to do is put the drawer fronts on the front of the drawers. In my case, I'm going to simply attach these with the pocket hole screws that I've already pre-drilled in here. But before I do that, I'm going to make this a little more decorative, and I'm going to put a chamfer around the edge of this drawer front. I get to use the new router, so I'm curious to see how this works. So these are the final drawer fronts loaded onto the drawer. So you can see they move in nicely, and these can all be easily interchanged too if I need to. I can just pull that out and I can reposition those. They're all in exactly the same positions. Here I'm going to demonstrate the new track rail hinge system that I've got. This is a design that Peter Millard did on the 10-minute workshop. So if you jump on his channel, you can have a look at how this works, and you can also download the plans to make one. I've also made a fence system. This is just using a bit of 20
by 40 rail, and I've got a stock block on there that I purchased from UK BENCHTOP, I think it was. The beauty about this rail is that the back piece is self-adjusting to the height of your workpiece. And as you bring the rail down, the back adjusts, and all you do is just adjust the front to sit the rail square. And if you change to a thicker piece and bring down the rail, the back adjusts, and all you do is just adjust the front. It's really quick and simple.